The neon sign of the blue lantern flickered like a dying heartbeat against the rain-slicked window, casting erratic shadows across the gravel lot packed with Harleys. Inside, the air hung thick with the scent of stale beer, cigarette smoke, and the faint metallic tang of engine oil that clung to every leather vest. It was Friday night in the forgotten corner of Eldridge Hollow, and the steel vultures were in full roar, 24 rough-edged riders crammed around scarred wooden tables, toasting Jax's 40th with shots of whiskey that burned like old grudges. Laughter boomed over the jukebox's low growl, a classic rock riff about freedom on the open road, but beneath it all simmered the quiet code of the club. Loyalty first, questions later. Coleridge Halverson sat at the bar's far end, nursing a half-empty bottle, his broad shoulders hunched under the weight of a faded kuta embroidered with the vulture's emblem, a steel bird talons outstretched. At 39, Ridge carried the miles in his weathered face, salt and pepper stubble, eyes like chipped flint, and that jagged scar snaking from his jawline down to his collarbone, a pale river of memory he never spoke of. It had been 12 years since the night it happened, some back-alley scrap outside a shelter in the dead of winter, when he was just a drifter piecing together a life from scraps. He'd walked away from it, but it never fully left him. Tonight, like most nights, he let the club's noise wash over him, a temporary shield against the ghosts. The door creaked open against the storm, letting in a gust of damp wind that rattled the bottles behind the bar. No one paid it much mind at first. Stragglers were common in a place like this. But then a figure slipped through, small and out of place. A boy, no more than 10, drowning in an oversized grey hoodie that swallowed his skinny frame. His sneakers squelched on the sticky floor, leaving faint muddy prints, and his dark hair was plastered to his forehead from the rain. Eyes wide but fixed ahead, he moved with a determination that cut through the haze, ignoring the curious stares from the bikers who paused mid-sentence. Ridge glanced up, his hand tightening on the bottle. Kids didn't wander into dives like the Blue Lantern, not without trouble chasing them. The boy scanned the room, breath coming in shallow bursts, then locked onto Ridge like a beacon. He weaved through the tables, past a cluster of vultures swapping war stories about a run-in with crooked cops last summer, and stopped right in front of him. The jukebox hit a scratchy pause, and the bar's murmur dipped into an uneasy hush. Without a word, the boy reached out, his small, trembling fingers brushing the edge of Ridge's collar. He tugged it aside just enough to trace the scar's rough outline, light as a whisper, but deliberate. Ridge froze, every muscle coiling like a spring. No one touched that mark. Not since the stitches came out. The boy's touch was cool against the warm skin, and in that instant, the world narrowed to the pressure of those fingertips, the faint scent of wet wool and fear clinging to him. "My dad had one like this," the boy said, his voice barely above the dying rain outside, but it sliced through the room like a blade. In the same place. The bar fell silent. Jax's glass clattered to the table. Conversations died mid-breath, heads turning as the weight of the words settled. Ridge's throat tightened, a cold knot forming as he stared down at the kid. Eli, though he didn't know the name yet. Those eyes, haunted and pleading, held a mirror to something buried deep. "Kid," Ridge rasped, gently pulling his collar back into place, "you shouldn't be here. Where's your folks?" Eli didn't flinch. He dug into the pocket of his hoodie, pulling out a crumpled photo, edges worn from too many folds. He unfolded it with care, sliding it across the bar top, scarred from years of knives and fists. The image was faded but clear enough. A young woman in her early 30s, smiling softly while cradling a baby in her arms. Behind her stood a man, the shot cropped just enough to show only his profile, strong jaw, shadowed eyes, and there, unmistakable on his neck, the twin of Ridge's scar. The woman was Marina Rowan, though that name would come later, whispered like a secret in the dim light. "Mom said if anything happened, I should find the man with the scar," Eli murmured, his voice cracking just once. "She left this for me, Said you'd know what to do. He glanced over his shoulder toward the door, as if expecting shadows to follow. She's gone. 2 months now. And they're after me. Ridge's pulse thrummed in his ears, louder than the storm. He didn't know this woman, this Marina. Her face tugged at some foggy corner of memory. A fleeting encounter, maybe. Years back in a life he kept locked away. But the scar. That was no coincidence. It bound them, a thread from a past he'd outrun. The vultures shifted in their seats, a ripple of protectiveness spreading like wildfire. Jax leaned in, his massive frame blocking the boy's view of the room. "Who's after you, son?" he growled, but his tone was gentle, the club's unspoken vow kicking in. Eli swallowed hard, eyes darting to the photo. "Some guy. Calls himself my uncle, but he's not. Dante. He shows up at school, says he's taking me home. But Mom said no. She hid a note in my book. 'Find Ridge, he'll keep you safe.' I took the bus here. It's the only place I could think of." The weight of it hit Ridge like a punch to the gut. A promise he didn't remember making, now demanding everything. He slid off the stool, towering over the boy but kneeling to his level, the scar pulling tight as he moved. "Listen to me, Eli. That your name?" The boy nodded. "You're safe here. No one's touching you tonight." But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him. Who was Marina to him? Why this scar as a key? And Dante, whoever he was, sounded like trouble with a capital T, the kind that didn't stop at bar doors. Outside, thunder rolled, and headlights pierced the rain briefly before vanishing into the night. Ridge felt the club's eyes on him, a silent pact forming. The vultures didn't back down from family, blood, or chosen. He pocketed the photo, his hand steady on Eli's shoulder. "Tell me everything, kid, from the start." As Eli began to speak, halting words about his mom's job at a quiet rehab clinic on the edge of town, strange men coming and going, whispers of secrets she wouldn't share. The bar's silence deepened into resolve. Ridge listened, the scar itching like a warning. Whatever Marina had stumbled into, it had pulled them all into the storm. And in the heart of the Blue Lantern, under the watchful gaze of steel birds, a forgotten promise stirred back to life. The rain hammered the tin roof of the Blue Lantern like distant gunfire, each drop a reminder that the night was far from over. Inside, the air grew heavier, the club's usual clamour replaced by a taut quiet that wrapped around the group like smoke. Ridge kept his hand on Eli's shoulder, a steady anchor as the boy perched on the stool beside him, legs dangling just above the rung. The photo lay between them on the bar, its edges curling under the dim yellow light from a hanging bulb that swayed gently with the storm's rhythm. Eli's voice was small at first, threading through the hush like a fragile wire. "Mom worked at the Harmony Center. It's this place on the outskirts where people go to. Fix things. You know, after bad stuff." He paused, fiddling with the hem of his hoodie, the fabric damp and clinging. Ridge nodded, his mind flashing to vague memories of similar spots, shelters and clinics he'd passed through in his drifting days, places where broken men like him sought a second chance. She was an assistant there, handling files and stuff. Nice lady, everyone said. But lately, she got quiet, started locking doors at home, checking the windows at night. Jax pulled up a stool on Eli's other side, his bulk a wall against the room's prying eyes. The other vultures formed a loose circle, not crowding but present, bearded faces etched with the lines of roads travelled and battles won without fists. Lena, the bartender with tattoos snaking up her arms like vines, slid a glass of water toward the boy without a word, her sharp gaze softening for a split second. "Go on, kid," Jax rumbled, his voice low to match the thunder outside. "What changed?" Eli took a sip, the glass trembling in his hands. "There were these men. Important ones, Mom said. Suits and shiny cars pulling up after hours. She'd come home late, eyes red like she'd been crying, but she wouldn't talk about it. One night I heard her on the phone, whispering about papers and they can't hide it forever. Then 2 months ago, she didn't come home. Left me with a neighbor and this note in my favorite book, the one about the lost wolf. He glanced at Ridge, those wide eyes searching for belief. It said your name, Ridge, and the scar, like it was a secret code. Ridge's scar burned under his collar, a phantom itch that pulled at threads of the past. He leaned closer, the scent of rain and fear mingling with the bar's familiar musk. Who was Marina Rowan? The face in the photo stirred something, a brief encounter perhaps, in that same winter 12 years back. He'd been patched up in a clinic much like the one Eli described, stitches fresh from the alley fight, when a young aide had tended to him. Kind hands, quiet words about starting over. But names. They blurred in the haze of painkillers and regret. "Did she ever mention why me?" he asked, voice gravel rough. Eli shook his head. "Just that you'd understand, that the scar meant you kept promises, even the hard ones." The words landed like stones in still water, rippling through Ridge. Promises, the vultures lived by them, oaths sworn over engine roars and shared scars, binding them tighter than blood. He'd made plenty in his youth, reckless vows to protect the lost, but time had worn them thin. Now this boy, with his trembling trust, dragged one back from the shadows. The door banged open again, letting in a fresh gust that scattered peanut shells across the floor. All heads turned as a figure shook off the rain. A wiry man in a cheap trench coat, face half hidden by a hood, eyes scanning the room with predatory focus. Dante Kroll, though none knew his name yet. He spotted Eli instantly, a false smile cracking his stubbled jaw. "There you are, nephew," he called, voice oily smooth, stepping forward with hands raised like he meant no harm. "Auntie's worried. Time to go home." The bar tensed, a collective inhale. Jax was on his feet in a blink, blocking the path, his shadow swallowing the intruder's slight frame. "Kid's with us," he said flatly, no room for debate. Ridge stood slowly, positioning himself between Eli and the door, his height casting a long silhouette across the scarred wood. Eli shrank back, clutching the photo like a shield. "He's not my uncle," the boy whispered urgently. "Mom said he's bad news, follows me everywhere since she left." Dante's smile faltered, eyes narrowing as he assessed the room, the vultures rising like a wall of leather and steel, hands hovering near pockets where tools of the road waited. "Just family business," he pressed, edging closer. "Boy's got no one else. Social services are involved. You wouldn't want trouble." Ridge's blood simmered, the scar pulsing with old fire. Family business? This smelled like the kind of lie that hid darker dealings, the sort Marina had whispered about on that forgotten phone call. He stepped forward, voice steady as asphalt. "Walk away, now, or we'll make sure you remember the way out." The words carried the weight of the club's code. No violence unless cornered, but protection absolute. Dante hesitated, glancing at Eli's pale face, then back toward the door, muttering curses under his breath. The bell above it jingled as he vanished into the storm, but the echo lingered, a promise of return. As the door slammed shut, the vultures exhaled, the tension easing into motion. Jax clapped Ridge on the back. "We ride with you on this, brother. Whatever the kid's mum dug up, it's ours now." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group, calls to check contacts, scout the clinic, watch the boys' school. Lena locked the door, drawing the blinds against the night. Eli watched it all, awe flickering in his eyes amid the fear, as if seeing a pack form around him for the first time. Ridge knelt again, meeting the boy's gaze. "Your mum's promise brought you here. Mine says I won't let you down." He didn't know the full truth yet. The files Marina had uncovered at the Harmony Center, ledgers hinting at extortion rings preying on the vulnerable, powerful men, buying silence with threats. Or how his own past tangled in it, that night at the shelter linking him to a man who'd vanished under suspicious clouds, body never found, seen whispering of struggle. But in that moment, with the rain drumming and the club's loyalty solid as forged iron, Ridge felt the stir of redemption. The scar wasn't just a mark anymore, it was a call to action. Eli nodded, a small spark of hope breaking through. "Can we find her?" Ridge glanced at the photo, then at his brothers, the chosen family that had pulled him from his own abyss. "We're gonna try, kid, starting tonight." Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the Blue Lantern, a new ride was gearing up, one fueled by honor, not engines, cutting through the dark toward whatever secrets waited. The first light of dawn crept through the blinds of the Blue Lantern like a hesitant intruder, painting the bar in muted greys and golds. The storm had relented sometime after midnight, leaving behind a world scrubbed clean but heavy with the scent of wet earth and lingering ozone. Empty bottles cluttered the tables, and the air still carried the faint haze of last night's smokes. But the vultures moved with purpose now, their leather creaking softly as they gathered around a back table scarred from too many late-night strategies. Eli dozed fitfully in a booth, wrapped in a spare jacket from Lena, his small chest rising and falling under the club's watchful eyes. Ridge hadn't slept. The photo burned a hole in his pocket, and with it, questions that clawed at the edges of his mind. Jack spread a crumpled map of Eldridge Hollow across the table, his thick fingers tracing the winding road to the Harmony Center, a squat building on the town's frayed outskirts, where the highway bled into forgotten fields. "Place looks clean on the surface," he said, voice a low rumble that cut through the quiet. "Rehab for vets and down-and-outers, but if the kid's right about those suits, it's got rot underneath." The others nodded. Tank, with his grease-stained knuckles. Mira, the only woman in the core crew, her braid tight as a whip. And Silas, the quiet one who knew every back road from here to the state line. They'd voted quick and unanimous after Dante slunk away. Eli was under Vulture's protection. No questions, no backing out. Ridge leaned against the bar, arms crossed, the scar on his neck pulling tight as he stared at the map. Marina's face haunted him now, sharper in the morning light. That clinic, hadn't he patched up there once? 12 years back, after the alley fight that left him bleeding and broken. A young nurse, or aide maybe, with steady hands and eyes that didn't judge. She'd cleaned the wound without flinching, murmuring about scars, telling stories worth keeping. No names exchanged, just a nod of thanks before he rode out, chasing horizons to outrun the pain. Could that have been her? The thought twisted like a knife, binding his past to this boy's fragile hope. "We start small," Ridge said finally, pushing off the bar. His voice carried the gravel of exhaustion, but resolve hardened it. "Silas, you and Mira scout the center. Eyes only, no contact. See who comes and goes after hours." Silas tipped his chin, already mentally mapping escape routes. Mira shot Ridge a look, her expression fierce. And the boy, Dante'll circle back. Ridge glanced at Eli, who stirred slightly, mumbling in his sleep. "He stays with me. Lena's got a room upstairs. We'll hole up till we know more." The group broke as the sun climbed higher, engines coughing to life in the lot outside. The roar of Harleys echoed off the Hollow's hills, a thunder of loyalty that drowned out the morning birds. Ridge watched them go, then gently shook Eli awake. "Time to move, kid. Can't stay parked here forever." Eli rubbed his eyes, the oversized jacket slipping off one shoulder, revealing a bruise blooming faint on his arm. Old from some tumble or worse. He didn't complain, just nodded, clutching the photo like a talisman. "You think Mom's okay?" The question hung raw, pulling at Ridge's chest. He wanted to promise the stars, but lies had no place here. "We're gonna find out, that's the vow." They slipped out the back, Ridge's old Indian chief purring low as Eli climbed on behind, arms wrapping tight around his waist. The road to Lena's apartment above the bar was short, but the air felt charged. Every shadow a potential threat. Eldridge Hollow unfolded around them, cracked sidewalks lined with shuttered shops, the distant hum of a mill that hadn't run in years. Ridge kept the speed steady, one eye on the rear view, but the street stayed empty. At the apartment, a sparse second-floor walk-up smelling of coffee and aged wood, Eli perched on the edge of a sagging couch, knees drawn up. "Mom used to read to me here," he said softly, gesturing to a shelf of dog-eared books, about wolves and riders who never quit. Ridge poured him a mug of milk from the fridge, the ceramic clinking against the counter. "Sounds like she knew a thing or two about keeping going." He sat across, pulling out the photo again, studying it closer, details sharpened. The woman's smile held a quiet strength, the baby, Eli, tiny and squirming, gazing up with those same haunted eyes. The man behind her, cropped but familiar now. Not Ridge, but the scar matched, a brutal twin from the same shadowed night. That alley fight hadn't been random. Two drifters crossing paths with the wrong crowd, blades flashing in the snow. One survived. The other vanished. Whispers of a cover-up tying back to the shelter's backers. Marina's clinic. It couldn't be coincidence. A knock rattled the door, sharp, insistent. Ridge tensed, hand drifting to the knife tucked in his boot. "Stay put," he whispered to Eli, moving silent to the peephole. Tank stood there, rain jacket dripping, face grim under his beard. "Trouble," he said, as Ridge let him in, voice hushed. Silas called from the ridge overlooking the center, saw Dante's ride, a black sedan, plates half obscured, pulling in with a couple of suits. They hauled in boxes, late for morning rounds. Looked heavy, like files or worse. Eli's eyes widened from the couch. "That's him, Dante. He came to school yesterday, said he'd take me if Mom didn't show." Tank knelt to the boy's level, his massive frame gentle. "Not today, champ, but we need more. Ridge, you ever cross paths with that place?" The question hung, and Ridge felt the past surge up, unbidden. "Once, long time ago. Got stitched after a bad night. The aide. She might have been Marina. If she saw what I did, extortion, maybe threats to keep quiet, it explains why she vanished." The pieces clicked, a dark puzzle forming. The Harmony Center wasn't just rehab, it was a front preying on the broken for leverage over the powerful. Marina had found the ledgers, names, payoffs, silenced voices. And Dante? Enforcer, cleaning up loose ends. Ridge's own brush with it years back made him a ghost in their story, the scar a mark of survival that Marina had remembered, turning it into a beacon for her son. Eli stood, photo in hand. "We have to go there. Mom's note said the truth's in the basement files." Ridge exchanged a look with Tank. The kid was right, but rushing in blind was suicide. "Not yet. We gather the crew. Hit it smart." As Tank headed out to rally the others, Ridge felt the weight settle deeper. This wasn't just protection. It was reckoning with a promise half-remembered, one that demanded he face the shadows he'd fled. Outside, the sun beat down, turning the hollow's dust to gold, but storm clouds gathered on the horizon again. The ride was just beginning, engines warming for the truth buried in the center's depths. Downstairs, the blue lantern stirred back to life, but upstairs, in the quiet apartment, Ridge and Eli shared a moment of fragile calm. The boy traced the scar on the photo, mirroring his earlier touch. Dad had stories too, about a fight that changed everything. Ridge nodded, the connection sealing like solder on steel. Whatever waited at the Harmony Center, corruption, lies, or Marina's fate, the vultures would carve through it. Loyalty wasn't given. It was forged in the fire of forgotten oaths, and as the first bikes rumbled back into the lot, Ridge knew. The silence of the bar had become a war cry, echoing into the day. The midday sun hung high over Eldridge Hollow, baking the asphalt into shimmering waves that distorted the horizon like a fever dream. Ridge's Indian chief idled in the shadow of a rusted water tower on the ridge overlooking the Harmony Center, its engine ticking cool as the dust settled around the tires. Below, the facility sprawled like a forgotten fortress. Low brick buildings ringed by chain-link fences, weeds clawing through cracked lots where wildflowers fought for space. It looked harmless from up here, A sanctuary for the weary, but Ridge knew better. Places like this hid their venom in plain sight, smiles masking the bite. Eli sat behind him on the bike, helmet too big and slipping over his eyes, but he didn't complain. His small hands gripped Ridge's jacket, knuckles white against the leather. "That's where Mom worked," he said, voice muffled but steady, pointing down at the main building where a faded sign promised, "Healing starts here." Ridge nodded, scanning the scene through binoculars borrowed from Silas. Cars dotted the lot. A few beat-up pickups from locals seeking help, but also sleek sedans with tinted windows, the kind that screamed money and secrets. One pulled in now, black as midnight, and out stepped Dante Kroll, his trench coat swapped for a crisp button-down that did nothing to hide the snake oil gleam in his eyes. He wasn't alone. Two men in suits flanked him, carrying a locked briefcase between them, their steps purposeful as they vanished through the side door. "Stay low, kid," Ridge murmured, lowering the binoculars. His scar itched under the collar, a persistent reminder pulling at the frayed edges of memory. Silas and Mira had radioed in earlier from their vantage across the road, confirmed the same. After-hours deliveries, guards patrolling the perimeter at odd hours, and whispers from a loose-lipped janitor about basement storage that no one touched. Marina had been onto it, piecing together files that named names, politicians, businessmen, even a crooked sheriff's deputy, extorting silence from the center's clients. Veterans with PTSD, drifters like Ridge once was, turned into pawns for leverage. She'd tried to copy the ledgers, slip them to a contact outside, but someone caught wind. Now she was gone, and Eli was the loose end they wanted tied off. Ridge handed the binoculars to Eli, letting him peer down. The boy's breath hitched as Dante emerged again, lighting a cigarette and scanning the ridge like he sensed eyes on him. "He's the one who came to the apartment last week," Eli whispered, pressing closer to Ridge. "Said Mum sent him, but his eyes, they lied." Ridge's jaw tightened, the weight of protection settling heavier. This wasn't just a ride for answers. It was a stand against the rot that chewed up the vulnerable, the same rot that had scarred him years back. That night in the alley, two strangers fighting off a gang tied to the shelter's backers, blades drawn over a debt that wasn't theirs. The other man, the one in the photo, had taken the worst of it, vanishing into the snow while Ridge staggered to the clinic. Marina had been there, her hands steady on the needle, her voice a quiet anchor. "Hold on, promises like yours don't end in the cold." He'd forgotten her name, but not the vows she'd drawn from him, to watch for the lost, even if it cost him. A crackle from the radio broke the silence, Silas's voice clipped and urgent. "Ridge, we've got movement. Suits heading to the east wing. Looks like a meeting and—" "Wait." One's carrying what might be a file box. Heavy. Mira chimed in, her tone sharp as a switchblade. "Dante's barking orders, something about the kids' trail going cold." "They're spooked." Ridge's pulse quickened, the pieces locking tighter. Marina's disappearance wasn't random. She'd been the key, her access to those files a threat they couldn't ignore. And Eli? Bait, or worse, a witness to whatever shadows she'd fled. "Pull back," Ridge ordered into the radio. "Regroup at the lantern. No heroics yet." He revved the engine, the deep rumble vibrating through them as they descended the ridge, gravel spitting under the tires. The wind whipped past, carrying the faint scent of pine from the hills, but tension coiled in Ridge's gut like a spring. Back at the bar, the vultures assembled in the back room. Maps and scribbled notes spread across a pool table felt worn thin from endless games. Jax paced, his boots thudding softly, while Tank sketched a rough layout of the center from memory. Eli hovered near Ridge, sketching his own version, a child's map with X's marking Mom's desk and the scary basement. "We hit the files tonight," Jack said, slamming a fist lightly on the table. "In and out. Silas disables the cameras. Mira and I cover the door." Eyes turned to Ridge, waiting for the nod. He felt the club's loyalty like a second skin, forged in runs through blizzards and standoffs with badges. These were his chosen brothers and sisters, bound by scars and oaths deeper than ink. But doubt flickered. Rushing in could drag them into the fire, expose old wounds. "What if it's a trap?" Mira asked, braiding her hair tighter. "Dante's no fool. And if Marina's tied to your past—" She trailed off, glancing at Eli, who traced the photo's edges absently. Ridge knelt to the boy's level, the room's low hum fading. "Your mum trusted me with a promise I didn't even remember. That means something." Eli looked up, eyes mirroring the quiet storm inside. "She said scars like yours are maps to the good guys. Dad's was from helping someone once, like you." The words pierced, unlocking a flood. The alley survivor, the clinic aide. Marina had known the other man too, pieced their stories together over late shifts. She'd made Ridge swear, in that haze of pain, to protect the threads that bound the broken. Now it circled back, Dante's shadow closing in. As dusk bled into the sky, painting the hollow in bruised purples, the plan solidified. Engines would roll silent under the moon, a convoy of shadows toward truth. But as they stepped into the lot, a distant siren wailed, cops, or worse, circling the edges. Dante's play, buying time. Ridge mounted his bike, Eli safely tucked with Lena for the night. "This ends with justice," he told Jax, the words of vow etched in the fading light. "Not blood. Her promise demands it." The vultures rode out, headlights cutting the twilight like blades, the road ahead winding toward the center's guarded heart. In the rear view, the blue lantern faded, but its silence roared, a pact unbroken, pulling Ridge toward redemption's edge. Whatever waited in those files, Marina's fate, the scar's full story, it would test every mile he'd traveled to get here. If this story's gripping you, hit that like button to show your support. The moon hung low over Eldridge Hollow, a silver sickle slicing through the veil of night, casting long shadows across the cracked highway that led to the Harmony Center. The vulture's convoy moved like ghosts, 6 Harleys in loose formation, engines throttled to a whisper, their chrome dulled under fresh mud from a backroad detour. Ridge led the pack, his Indian chief humming steady, the vibration a counterpoint to the knot twisting in his gut. The air was crisp, laced with the sharp bite of pine and distant rain, but beneath it lingered the metallic edge of tension, like the prelude to a storm no one could outride. Silas flanked him on the left, his bike a sleek shadow, while Mira and Jax brought up the rear, eyes scanning the rear view for tails. Tank had stayed behind with Lena, guarding Eli in the apartment's dim safety. The boy's sketch of the basement clutched like a battle plan. "Eyes sharp," Ridge murmured into the comms clipped to his collar, the static crackle faint over the wind. "We get the files, confirm Marina's trail, and ghost out. No noise." The words were for himself as much as the crew, a reminder that this ride was for truth, not vengeance. Though the scar on his neck throbbed with the pull of old fires, they cut the engines a half-mile out, wheeling the bikes into a thicket of scrub oak that scratched at leather like desperate fingers. Footsteps muffled on dew-slick grass, they crested a low rise, the center looming below, floodlights pooling yellow on the fences, the main building a hulking silhouette pierced by narrow windows. A single guard patrolled the lot, flashlight beams sweeping lazy arcs, oblivious to the shadows closing in. Silas knelt first, toolkit in hand, his fingers deft on the chain link as he snipped a section clean, silent as a held breath. They slipped through, hearts pounding in rhythm with the night's quiet pulse. Mira took point toward the east wing, her lithe form melting into the gloom, while Jax covered the door with a nod to Ridge. "Basement access, janitor's entrance, per the kid's map." Ridge gripped the knob, the metal cool and unyielding under his gloved palm. It turned with a soft click, unlocked in the complacency of routine, and they eased inside. The hallway stretched dim and sterile, linoleum floors echoing faint squeaks, the air heavy with the chemical tang of bleach masking deeper secrets. Flickering fluorescence buzzed overhead, casting jittery light on faded posters promising renewal, but the walls seemed to close in, whispering of lies buried beneath. They descended the stairwell, steps measured, the air growing cooler and damper with each tread, like slipping into an unmarked grave. At the bottom, a heavy door barred the way, padlocked, but Silas made quick work, picks dancing in the dim glow of a penlight. It swung open on rusted hinges, releasing a puff of stale dust that caught in their throats. The basement unfolded, rows of metal shelves crammed with boxes, labeled in faded ink, intakes 23, client records Mista, and deeper in, file cabinets hulking like sentinels. Ridge's flashlight beam cut through the murk, illuminating stacks of paper yellowed with age, the faint must of forgotten lives. "Spread out," Jax whispered, his bulk filling the doorway as he kept watch. Mira rifled a cabinet near the back, her breath shallow. "These are the intakes, names, dates, look for Rowan." Ridge moved to a corner desk, cluttered with ledgers, his scar pulling tight as he flipped pages. Entries blurred at first, stories of men like him, broken by wars or roads, seeking solace. Then a name jumped. Marina Rowan, assistant, logged shifts overlapping late nights. Notes in the margins, her handwriting neat but urgent. Discrepancies in payments, cross-ref DK, Dante Kroll. The pieces locked, a chill racing down Ridge's spine. He pulled a thicker file labeled Confidential Board Oversight, the cover warped from humidity. Inside, the truth uncoiled like smoke, ledgers detailing payoffs, not healing, extortion tallies where clients' vulnerabilities were traded like currency. Names of the powerful scrolled down, a state senator, a mill owner, even ties to the local sheriff's office, silencing voices with threats or worse. Marina's annotations circled entries from 12 years back, a shelter incident, alley fight logged as unresolved altercation. The other man's disappearance noted vaguely. Body unrecovered, hints of struggle swept under. Ridge's breath caught. That night the blades, the snow. Marina had documented it all, piecing how the center's backers covered tracks, using drifters as disposable shields. A soft scrape echoed from the stairs, footsteps deliberate, Jax tensed, hand on his belt. Company. Mira slid files into a satchel, but Ridge froze on one page, a photo clipped inside, grainy but unmistakable. Marina, younger, standing beside the alley survivor, the man from Eli's picture. Beside them, a note in her script. Ridge, witness to the promise. If shadows return, protect the thread. It hit like a gut punch. She'd been there that night, not just at the clinic after, but in the fray's edge, binding their scars with a vow whispered in the chaos. Watch for the lost, honor the unbroken. He'd ridden away, but she'd carried it, turning the mark into a lifeline for her son. The door at the top creaked wider. Voices filtering down, Dante's oily drawl laced with another, "The boy's trail ends at that bar. Check the records. If the woman's files are here..." Boots thudded closer. Jax signaled retreat, but Ridge lingered a beat, pocketing the photo and a slim ledger, the key to it all. They melted into the shadows, hearts slamming as the basement light flared brighter. Dante entered first. Flashlight sweeping, his face twisted in the beam, predatory, unyielding. They burst out the side exit, lungs burning, sprinting for the fence as alarms wailed belatedly, a shrill cry piercing the night. Engines roared to life in the thicket, the convoy peeling away as headlights swept the lot behind. Dante's sedan bursting through gates, pursuit hot on their heels. Bullets? No, not yet, just the chase. Tires screaming on gravel, the hollow's roads twisting like veins. Ridge gunned it. Wind tearing at his face, the satchel strapped tight. Mira's voice crackled over comms. "We got enough. Proof of the rot. Marina's linked to your night." The chase stretched miles, sirens joining the fray from town edges, but the vultures knew these backways. Cuts through gullies, leaps over creeks that swallowed pursuing lights. They shook the tail near the old mill, vanishing into the dark as dawn's first blush stained the sky. Back at the lantern, breath ragged, they unloaded the files under the bar's flickering sign. Eli waited upstairs, eyes lighting at Ridge's nod. "We found her words, kid. She's fighting from the shadows." Ridge spread the ledger open, the scar a map now, guiding them deeper. Marina hadn't vanished alone. She'd hidden copies, allies in the web. But Dante's hunt closed tighter, the corruption's fangs bared. The vultures gathered close, oaths renewed in the quiet hour, loyalty aflame against the coming storm. Redemption wasn't a straight road. It wound through promises kept, scars shared, pulling them toward the heart of the lie. And as the sun rose, painting the hollow gold, Ridge felt the weight lift just enough. The ride continued, honor as their compass. The sun climbed higher over Eldridge Hollow, turning the Blue Lantern's gravel lot into a patchwork of light and shadow, where the vultures' bikes stood like silent sentinels, dew evaporating from their tanks in faint wisps of steam. Inside, the back room felt smaller now, walls pressing in as the crew huddled around the pool table, the stolen ledger splayed open under a bare bulb that hummed like a distant swarm. The air carried the sharp bite of fresh coffee mixed with the earthy residue of night soil clinging to their boots, a reminder of the raid's narrow escape. Ridge traced a finger along the ledger's yellowed pages, his calloused skin catching on the paper's rough edges, each entry a thread pulling tighter around the truth. Eli sat cross-legged on a stool nearby, the oversized jacket draped over his knees like a cape, his eyes fixed on the photo now pinned to the table with a rusted tack. The boy's face, still smudged with faint dirt from the morning's vigil, held a mix of wonder and weariness, as if the weight of adult secrets had settled on his narrow shoulders overnight. "She wrote about you here," he said softly, pointing to a marginal note in Marina's script, neat loops amid the chaos of numbers. "Said the scar was a sign of someone who doesn't run." Ridge's throat tightened, the words echoing the vow he'd half forgotten, forged in that clinic's dim light 12 years back. Marina hadn't just tended wounds. She'd seen the man beneath, binding him to a promise of guardianship for the lost threads of lives like hers. Jax leaned over the table, his broad frame casting a shadow that swallowed half the ledger, brows furrowed as he scanned the extortion tallies. "This goes deep, names from the State House down to the mill boss. They're squeezing vets for dirt on deals gone sour, turning rehab into a blackmail mill." Mira nodded beside him, her fingers flipping through the satchel's haul, pulling out a slim envelope sealed with wax long cracked. "And this, Marina's copies. She hid them in her desk drawer, dated just before she vanished. Mentions a safe house on the old quarry road, coordinates scribbled in code." The room stirred, a low murmur rippling through the group like wind over dry grass. Silas, wiping grease from his hands on a rag, traced the map they'd marked earlier. "Quarry's abandoned, but it's got caves. Perfect for stashing someone off the grid." Ridge felt the pull, a magnetic draw toward that spot, but caution anchored him. Dante's chase last night had been too clean, too coordinated. The suits at the center weren't scrambling blind. They knew pieces, Eli's trail to the bar, whispers of a biker crew sniffing around. "We ride careful," he said, voice steady as the engines idle. "Tank, you and Lena keep eyes on the boy here. Double lock the doors, no one in or out till we signal." Eli protested with a small shake of his head, but Ridge knelt, meeting those pleading eyes. "Your mum's code led us this far. Trust it a little longer." The boy nodded reluctantly, fingers brushing the photo's edge, a silent pact forming in the space between them. The convoy geared up under the midday glare, 4 bikes this time, Ridge, Jax, Mira and Silas, engines coughing to life with a throaty growl that echoed off the hollow's hills. They took the back roads, weaving through sun-dappled woods where pine needles carpeted the path like fallen stars, the scent of resin thick in the air. The quarry road emerged after miles of twisting asphalt, a forgotten scar on the landscape, rusted gates hanging crooked, overgrown with brambles that snagged at pant legs. They killed the motors at the perimeter, The sudden silence, amplifying the distant drip of water from sheer rock faces, a rhythmic pulse like a hidden heartbeat. Silas scouted ahead, his form vanishing into the underbrush, radio crackling back minutes later. Clear so far. Tracks in the mud, fresh tire marks, but no heat signatures. They pushed on foot, boots crunching over shale that glittered like shattered glass under the sun. The main pit yawned below, a vast bowl of shadow and echo, but Mira veered toward a side crevice, her sharp eyes catching a glint of reflective tape on a boulder. Marina's mark, subtle as a whisper. "This way," she murmured, leading them into a narrow fissure where the air cooled abruptly, carrying the faint, musty tang of damp stone, and something warmer. Human presence. The cave opened gradually, walls slick with moisture that beaded like sweat on skin. Flashlights pierced the gloom, revealing crates stacked haphazardly, a lantern flickering low on a makeshift table of plywood and crates. And there, in the corner alcove shrouded by a tattered blanket, sat Marina Rowan, thinner than the photo, her dark hair pulled back in a hasty knot, eyes hollow but alive with a fierce spark. She startled at their approach, scrambling for a hidden knife, but froze when Ridge stepped into the light, his scar catching the beam like a beacon. "You," she breathed, voice raw from disuse, the word a bridge across the years. "The Promise Keeper." Ridge's heart slammed against his ribs, the pieces flooding back, her hands on his wound that long-ago night, the quiet oath she'd coaxed from him amid the pain. Watch for the shadows, for those who can't. She'd been more than an aide, witness to the alley's aftermath, linking the vanished man's fate to the center's web. "Eli sent us," he said, holstering his light, the crew fanning out to secure the perimeter. "The scar! He found me!" Marina's face crumpled, relief warring with fear as she rose. Clutching a worn notebook to her chest, "My boy, Dante's closing in. I hid to copy the full ledgers, proof of the extortion, how they silenced your friend that night, buried bodies of truth, not just men." Jax kept watch at the entrance, the wind whistling through like a warning, while Mira helped Marina gather her things, files tucked into the satchel, the notebook detailing escape routes and allies she'd contacted in secret. "The Center's board runs it all," Marina explained in hushed tones, her steps unsteady as they moved toward the light. "Dante's their hound. Tracked me here after I slipped the note to Eli. But with this," she tapped the notebook, "we expose them. No more hiding." Ridge nodded, the weight of her trust settling like an old cloak, familiar and heavy. The scar no longer itched, it guided, a map to this reunion forged in forgotten vows. But as they emerged into the fading afternoon, a low rumble echoed from the road. Engines, multiple, closing fast. Dante's reinforcements drawn by some leak or hunch. Mira's radio spat static. "Tank! Trouble at the lantern." Dante's men circling the bar. The air thickened, the sun dipping toward the hills, casting the quarry in elongated shadows. Marina gripped Ridge's arm, her touch cool and urgent. "Get Eli first. The files come after." He met her gaze, the promise complete now, binding past to present in a chain of loyalty unbreakable. The vultures mounted up, Marina wedged behind Mira on a spare ride, the convoy bursting from the quarry like arrows loosed from a bow. Dust billowed in their wake, the chase reigniting with a vengeance, roads blurring into a test of will and wheel. Redemption's path twisted ahead, the hollow secrets unraveling 1 mile at a time. Honor the fuel that kept them rolling toward the storm's heart. The engines thundered like the hollow's own heartbeat as the vultures tore down the quarry road, dust clouds billowing in their wake like smoke signals of defiance. Ridge gripped the handlebars of his Indian chief, the wind slicing through his jacket with a chill that carried the promise of confrontation. Behind him, Jax's bike growled in tandem, while Mira carried Marina. The woman's arms locked tight around her waist, the notebook pressed against her chest like a shield. Silas brought up the rear, eyes flicking to the mirrors where distant headlights pierced the twilight. Dante's pack, closing the gap with predatory precision. The air whipped past, thick with the scent of crushed gravel and pine sap, the sun's last rays bleeding red across the hills, painting the chase in hues of fire and shadow. Marina's voice cut through the roar over the comms, faint but fierce. The bar! They'll go for Eli first. Dante knows the files are key, but the boys the leverage. Ridge nodded into the wind, his scar a taut line of resolve. The pieces Marina had revealed in the cave burned fresh. The centre's web extended further than Ledger's, ties to that alley night where her husband, the scarred man in the photo, had uncovered a thread of corruption before vanishing. Dante's crew had silenced him, framing it as a drifter's brawl, and Marina had carried the torch, her quiet shifts at the center yielding the proof. Now, with Eli in the crosshairs, the vow Ridge had made in Payne's haze demanded everything. Protect the thread, honor the lost. The blue lantern came into view as they crested the final rise, its neon sign flickering erratically against the encroaching dusk, a beacon in the hollow's frayed heart. But the lot was a war zone. 3 black sedans idling like sharks, their doors flung open, shadows spilling out. Dante and 6 others, burly enforcers in ill-fitting suits, circling the bar's entrance. Tank's voice crackled urgent over the radio. "They're inside, Ridge. Pinned us down. Lena's got the kid in the back, but they're demanding the files." "Gunshots?" "No, not yet. Just the shatter of a bottle through a window. Threats barked like thunder. The air inside thick with standoff tension." Ridge signaled a wide arc. The convoy splitting to flank the lot, engines cutting to a low growl that vibrated the ground like an approaching quake. He killed his bike first, boots hitting gravel with a crunch, the satchel of files slung over his shoulder. The vultures fanned out, a wall of leather and steel, Mira helping Marina dismount while Jax and Silas drew the enforcer's eyes. Dante stepped forward from the bar's door, his face a mask of false calm under the sign's blue glow, a pistol glinting at his belt but holstered, for now. "Hand over the kid and the papers," he called, voice smooth as oil over broken glass. "This ends quiet, or the hollow gets messy." The bar's door creaked wider, revealing Tank's massive frame blocking the threshold. Lena behind him with a shotgun leveled low, Eli's wide eyes peeking from the shadows. The boy's face lit at the sight of his mother, a gasp escaping that silenced the standoff for a beat. "Mom!" Marina surged forward, Ridge's arm the only thing steadying her, tears carving tracks through the dust on her cheeks. Dante's eyes narrowed, flicking to the notebook in her grip, realization dawning like a slow poison. "You!" he snarled, hand twitching toward his weapon. "Slipped the net. But those files, they bury us all." Ridge stepped into the open, the crew closing ranks behind him, a human barrier forged in miles and oaths. The evening air hung heavy, laced with the sharp tang of gun oil and fear sweat, the hollow's distant mill whistle a mournful underscore. "It's over, Dante," he said, voice gravel steady, pulling the ledger from the satchel and holding it aloft, pages fluttering like captured flags. "Marina's got the full story. Your payoffs, the senator's bribes, the alley cover-up that took her husband. We ride this to the light, not your shadows." The enforcers shifted, uncertainty rippling through their ranks as Jax's glare pinned them. Mira's hand hovering near her boot-knife. Dante laughed, a hollow bark that echoed off the bar's weathered walls, but his eyes darted, calculating the odds, the vulture's unyielding line. "You think badges care? This town's bought." Marina shook her head, stepping beside Ridge, her presence a quiet force. "Not anymore. Copies went out this morning to papers outside the hollow. A Fed contact I trusted. The thread's loose. You can't pull it back." Eli emerged then, slipping past Tank, running to his mother with arms outstretched, the reunion a raw pulse in the tension. Dante's men exchanged glances, the first cracks forming as the weight of exposure settled. The standoff stretched, seconds ticking like a slowing engine, until Dante's shoulders slumped, the fight leaching from his stance. "Burn it!" he muttered to his crew, but they hesitated, one by one holstering weapons, backing toward their cars. No shots fired, no blood spilled, just the erosion of lies under truth's glare. As the sedans peeled away, tail lights fading into the night, the hollow exhaled, the bar's silence breaking into relieved murmurs. Jax clapped Ridge on the back. The crew gathering close, Eli buried in Marina's embrace, the photo from his pocket, now a bridge mended. Inside, under the lantern's warm haze, they pieced the aftermath. Calls to clean contacts, the files sealed for delivery, Dante's web unraveling with dawn's light. Marina traced Ridge's scar, her touch an echo of that clinic night. "You kept the promise," she whispered, Eli nodding beside her. The boy, safe in the fold of chosen family. Ridge felt the weight lift, redemption not a blaze but a steady burn, honor reclaimed, loyalty the road that led them home. The vultures raised glasses in the quiet hours, toasts to threads unbroken, the hollow shadows yielding to morning's gold. Scars told stories, but promises wrote the endings, binding them tighter than any chain. Thank you for riding this journey with us to the end. If these tales of honor and heart moved you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We've got more stories of quiet courage waiting on the horizon. Drop a comment below. What promise would you keep, no matter the miles?